Hey guys, today I get to sit down with a 9-figure CMO talking about how they grew their company selling leather goods from $3.5 million to over 9 figures this last year. You guys are not going to want to miss this. So for people who don't know anything about MacCoy, I have known Curtis, who is the founder of Portland Leather Goods, for a couple, maybe even a few years. I had Curtis on my podcast ages ago. It was at least, it was 2 or 3 years ago, something like that. You guys should go check out that episode. It'd be episode 300 and something. It was a long time ago. And we slowly got to know each other. And he kept saying, he's like, no, but you got to meet MacCoy. He's brilliant. He is brilliant. And I was like, yeah, sure. I just know you, Curtis, like whatever. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. MacCoy Merkley, welcome to Secrets to Scaling Your E-commerce Brand.
Hey, I am so excited to be here and to talk.
Tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm the CMO of Portland Leather Goods. I started about 7 years ago. Prior to that, I was a wedding photographer. So I needed like a way to get up and get out of bed every morning because I was laying around. So I found this crazy little Craigslist ad and joined Portland Leather Goods. It was a wild ride. Back at the time, the company was obviously much smaller, and I just fell in love with this.
And was it based in Portland?
Yeah. So we used to make.
Because I'm hearing wedding photographer. Yeah. I'm hearing, you and I, before we got on, we're talking about Etsy, like all of this. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm from the Vancouver area. We're the same, MacCoy. We are the same.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, no, we were on Etsy. With most companies when they start, like it takes a lot to get going, and so you can do this like really scary thing, which is purchase a ton of inventory from overseas, or you can start with what you can make with your own two hands. So that was Curtis's story. Started in the garage and with his own two hands making journals and leather bags. And so one of the natural ways to sell those is Etsy. Like Etsy is about handcrafted goods. So that's how they started. They grew that to about $3.5 million before I joined the team. And at the time, the website or the .com was doing about less than $1 million a year. So that was my
What were you hired into? Like what role at $3.5 million? What kind of title were you hired into? Because I'm assuming it wasn't CMO at the time.
No. Yeah, very good question. Okay, so I found this crazy Craigslist ad, right? Because again, I'm just wasting my weeks and I'm like, I got to get out of bed. And I saw this ad for digital media specialist, which is just gobbledygook. It meant nothing, but the ad was like really well written and it sounded exciting, but I didn't have a resume because I'd worked for myself for, years and years. And so I'm like, what am I going to put? Like, I don't know what to put on a resume. So I'll be clever. I'll write them a cover letter because they asked for that. And then instead of showing a resume, I'll just show up the next day at like 9 a.m. I'll just like knock on the door and ask to talk to somebody. I thought that's what you did. My parents, kind of encouraged me to do that in life. So I walked in for the digital media specialist and they said, do you have an interview? And I was like, no, I have nothing. And they said, well, okay, hold on. We'll just wait around. Curtis will be here in a minute. And he walked by in traditional Curtis fashion, just kind of like caffeinated and running around the workshop. And he said, well, I have a girl coming in for an interview in like 20 minutes. Do you just want to hang out and make it a group interview? And I was like, sure. The kind of the rest is history. We had a very interesting interview, shall I say? I thought I bombed it. Like we just started riffing and going back and forth. And then when it was time, the interview was obviously coming to a natural close. He said, all right, you can go. And I was like, okay, obviously I bombed it. I'll see y'all later. And he stood up and walked out with me and he said, come back in 30 minutes. So he talked to that girl for a little bit longer. And then I came back in 30 minutes and started the very next day. So it's been a wild ride.
Oh my gosh, 7 years ago. I mean, guys, this is massive growth, right? If you think about it. So MacCoy, again, I'm so glad you don't know some of my history here. So I've been in the product game for since I think it was like 2013. I was actually just doing another interview, and the very first thing that I sold, so I owned a restaurant at the time. The very first thing that I sold was actually hoverboards. When hoverboards were in, it was like 2014-ish. Learned Google Ads, figured it out. I actually sold a bunch of hoverboards. But then we started with Etsy as well. So my wife, when we were first married, she was selling different veils on Etsy. And so that was a thing. And then we just kind of went from there. She sold jewelry. So she used to sell jewelry and that would pay for our Mexico trips. And it was awesome. It was like, yeah, sweet, on Etsy. And then we started a baby clothing company. And then we grew that fairly substantially. That recently actually went bankrupt. Very sad ending to that company. That was incredible. But anyway, that's a lot of my history. And then I owned a bunch of brands throughout that. So you only know me as the TikTok shop guy. I'm like, oh no, MacCoy. I'm a brand owner. This is a new Jordan that's an agency owner.
Was the baby clothes, was that on Etsy as well?
So it started on Etsy.
Okay.
Exactly. So we started, and I remember somebody then came to Etsy and was like, I want to order 500 of these for my store. And we're like, oh, and they were baby leggings. And we're like, okay, I mean, that's interesting. And then they just kept ordering, and we, scaled that up. And we never fully integrated our manufacturing, which is something that I would love to walk through with you on the marketing side. How does that play into your story of what you guys are doing?
Yeah, we can start with the history lesson before we get to the current day. So, as I mentioned, Curtis started with making stuff with his own two hands, and eventually, other people got involved, and we started a little workshop, and that's the workshop I walked to in Southeast Portland. That was awesome. It was an era. What I usually tell people is from the day I walked in, we had ads out for sewers because we needed people who could come in and sew this leather. And sewing is not a really well-maintained skills throughout, the eras or the decades. And leather is even harder than that. It's not a little consumer sewing machine. It's a big industrial sewing machine, to push through the leather. But for years, all the production was in-house. So we had sewing machines and big hydraulic clicker presses, to chomp out the shape of the leather, stencil or what have you, for years and years. And it wasn't until COVID that we had that ad out the whole time, and we just couldn't get enough sewers in. We had a small little army of them, but not enough. And then when COVID happened, people obviously didn't want to come in. And then it wasn't a really smart idea to keep people, in right next to each other sewing. We shut off the website, which was a very disappointing moment for me because I had months earlier, I had my first son in January of 2020. So I was like, all right, I'm ready to go full time. Let's commit to Portland Leather Goods. And I came right back after paternity leave, and they were like, hey, we're shutting everything down. I was like, that's not an option. We're not doing that. No, I got an idea. Here's what we'll do. We'll go to pre-order. We'll tell people, we'll give them their bag at some point in the future. Maybe we'll have one sewer come in. Who knows? Maybe it'll be 2 weeks. Maybe it'll be 2 years. We have no idea. It's like Kickstarter style, right? But that let us keep what I call the heartbeat monitor a lot on. You got to see sales and ads slowly pick up, even though we were not even delivering product. And at some point, that just got so big, so many outstanding orders that Curtis and I, and especially Curtis, was like, I got to figure something out. So he strapped some cash to him and flew down to Mexico and got us bags in production in Mexico. And so that's really where that started. And that's really where we took the production from in-house in Portland over to Mexico. It just got too big. We couldn't keep people in the warehouse, and we needed more. So that's where we're at now, is the current state, which is we have this massive facility in Mexico. We're the largest bag manufacturer in Mexico, or in North America.
If you guys have ever seen Curtis on a meeting before, he takes the meeting right in front of looks like hundreds of people behind him.
It is.
And it's just, I don't know if it is hundreds, but it looks like hundreds, whatever. Yeah. And it's quite the sight. It's almost like Dr. Evil-ish, him in front of everyone like that. And it's an incredible thing to see. I can't imagine. So, okay, there's a couple things I want to touch on here first. Number one is don't waste a disaster, right? Don't waste these things that happen. We think at the time that they're so disastrous, right? Like COVID. And it was for a lot of people. I don't want to say that it wasn't, but I think that we oftentimes will judge something in a short time frame rather than a long time frame, because you probably wouldn't have gone to Mexico if it wasn't for COVID.
Without a doubt.
Right?
Yeah.
And you're in that moment. And again, recently, I just talked about this of one of our companies going bankrupt, and the amount of things that changed in my life with that one brand. It's funny. I sold a brand in that year, and one went bankrupt, and the amount of things that changed for me for the better that wouldn't have happened if not. I just wanted to pause on this for a second, because I think it's really incredible, and especially being marketers, right? I am a marketer at heart, MacCoy. I'm not a product guy. I am a marketer. I love to have these conversations around marketing, and I think we're so used to pivoting constantly, right? Pivoting messaging, pivoting platforms, pivoting all of these different things to try to sell a product. That I find it just inspiring to hear that, right? Where were you guys at revenue-wise in 2020?
Gosh, you're testing my memory here. I'll have to think. I don't want to. One of the things I pride myself on is trying to say the right numbers at the right time. I believe we were right around 15-ish million. So exponential growth after that.
So
But
like,
I mean,
like a tenth of where you are right now.
Yeah. To your point, it's remaining open. If everyone kind of intuitively knows, they look back at this like golden age of e-commerce, which was kind of coming out of the COVID era where everyone was at home, and that was awesome. But in the moment, like, it was terrifying, right? Like I mentioned, I just had a baby, and I had hung up my camera and said no to all weddings that year, which most of them didn't end up happening in the first place. But just staying open and really, like, it reminds me of that parable, where some bad happens or good or bad happens, and the person says, we'll see what happens. Like,
totally.
Not counting my blessings early, not counting my tragedy. Do you love that one? Okay, yeah.
I love that one.
We'll see what happens, but no, you have to stay open. Like, we're in the business of surviving. We're right now, something I love. We're talking about this all the time. Is we're making this transition, and I keep saying the first 10 years to the next 100. Like, we're not interested in being here for a little amount of time. Like, we're interested in the long haul, the next 100 years. And if that's the goal, like, you got to stay open. You got to roll with the punches, and things are going to happen, good or bad. We'll see. Like, we'll make the most of them. That's the constant. We'll make the most of whatever it is.
What gets you excited to market leather bags?
Great question.
Is there something that beyond, because I think that there's this game of marketing, right? Mm-hmm. I love the game of marketing. And then I'll usually backfill it with a reason. Like, I'll be like, oh yeah, okay. I love marketing these high-end baby clothes that last because moms don't have to buy clothes. Yeah, that's right. That's right. To me, in the end, I'm just like, I just love the game of getting something good into people's hands. Is there something like that for you with Portland Leather Goods, or you just tell me.
No, great
what is that thing?
I'm a lot like you. Like, I love the game. So, like, the first few products I marketed and like advertised, coming in with digital media specialists, that wasn't a part of my role, was to advertise. And but we had these makeup bags, and we had these stop kits, like a toiletry bag. We used to monogram them for bridesmaids and groomsmen for weddings. And I said, hey, you know what? Fish in a barrel. I know how to target bridesmaids and groomsmen. But this is back in the day, where I used to get written permission for $20 a day. And now our advertising budget is much bigger than that. And so I just started advertising these silly little products to this audience I knew how. And I just fell in love, not so much with any one specific thing, but like you mentioned, just the game of it, just figuring it out. I often refer to marketing as just accelerated common sense. I didn't go to college. Like, I have a very, humble upbringing in rural Washington. And so I kept waiting for it to get like way above my head, like trigonometry and calculus and all these things. And what it really ended up just happened to be, or what it turned out to be, is just accelerated common sense, just making a massive volume of good, high quality common sense decision. Like, and so I fell in love with just the process, just over and over and over.
Not hacks?
Yeah. I mean, like, who knew, right? Like, just making good choices every day. It's crazy. I know. I could ramble on and on about the hack culture that it is marketing, but really it's showing up every day and making good decisions. I fell in love with that. But the backbone of like our business is our product. And like, the product is just so good. In fact, I talked about this the other day on LinkedIn. I was like, if you don't believe in your product, you don't believe in your services that you're selling, like, you should quit your job and find a better product or better service. Because like, you're not going to grow as fast if you're trying to like sneak around, hide certain features, or, swindle people and get it into their hands. You're not going to learn retention because they're not going to buy it twice. And all you're learning is how to, deceive and cheat people into buying your product. That's not how I feel. I love our products. Like,
which is why people hate agencies, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, coming from the product world to agency owner world is very difficult, right? Because you see through all of people who become agency owners are incredible marketers usually, right? And you can see it, because I've hired lots of agencies over the years, right, with my brands, and you can see it for the first, like, they can kind of get away with it for the first 2 or 3 months. And then comes this moment where you're like, you don't know what the heck you're doing. Right. But you're really good at selling.
Yeah, that's the tricky line. I mean, so like, that's I never actually connected that, going from product to agency, but like, I love our product. Like, obviously I don't carry a lot of purses or in my day-to-day life, but the product is just great. Like, it really, really is. We have this really unique lane. We're bringing back this business model that big bag brands kind of left for dead in the 90s. As soon as they could cover leather with oils and plastics and all of these things, they just said goodbye to the real natural leather products. And so I'm genuinely like excited to tell people about it, because it's not a product type that you can really go out and find. There's not a lot of like, not competition, but there's not a lot of like options out there to get a real, like, genuine leather bag And we happen to design those really simply. Like we don't slap on designer logos. We're not trying to, build in every last feature to the bag because then it would be expensive and it would be designer. And that's not what we want. We want a really high quality leather bag that lasts forever and ever. And, my wife carries them all the time. I love seeing our products out and about. Like they look fantastic. I love talking to people. Our returning customers have created just this insane community on Facebook. I don't know if you joined that, but like they love the products and that makes it so much better for me. So it's the game times just the fact that the product is so good.
Totally. And that's what you can actually build community around, right? When you have a product that does that for people. It's interesting. I'm having this emotional reaction right now. My one of my best friends had a leather shoe company for years and made baby leather shoes in Canada and had his own factory. And when you were talking about that before, I was just like, man, that was such a beautiful thing that he had. And he had some issues too. And I think a lot of Canadians have had issues just with the dollar is probably the biggest issue that we have in doing this. But there's something incredible about seeing somebody with your product. And I think that the best marketers are, it's funny, I said I wasn't a product person before, but it's like, but also you have to be, right? Product leads to marketing. Always. Mm-hmm. And we talk about that actually at the agency too. It's like the only possible way that we ever have anything to talk about at the agency is because we have a good product. So we have to get a case study on this product that we're doing. Otherwise, there's no marketing possible. It's all just lies, right?
Yeah.
And that's really difficult. And I think that the marketers listening to this, and probably most people that listen to this are really marketers at heart, need to understand that you need to go back to that product. I remember buying just this. I still remember I was a paramedic actually at the time. And so I was a paramedic for 12 years while I was doing all of my business stuff. And I remember purchasing this just piece of junk product. It was like 2017, I think, or 2016 when drop shipping was a huge thing. And it was this thing that held my iPhone and it was kind of like a snaky sort of thing. And I don't know why I thought I needed it. I remember getting it and being like, oh, this just let me down so much. And that was during the golden age of e-com, right?
Yeah.
And that was garbage. What a terrible time to buy cheap products online. And so hearing what you guys are doing, it's incredible. It's incredible because I think that bringing things like that into the world that people look at, and maybe it's just because we're millennials, right? And we look at these things and we're like, I love beautiful things around me at all times. I don't know what it does. It just makes me happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for bringing that to the world.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. I know, and product is so important. Like we're in February now, so I'm a little too late to make my like hot take trends, prediction of trends for the next year. But I think that's we're going to have another revolution as it comes to product. Like in 2025, I think we can all kind of stop speculating that like, does Meta work or not? Like, spoiler alert, it works, right? And I think me and a lot of other marketers, like I'm hearing like product expansion is going to be really big. Mm-hmm. And so product quality is top of mind because we just don't have to speculate like we did for the last 10 years. Like, is the Meta algorithm shifting? Like it kind of works. If you get it right and you have a great product that's worth amplifying, it works. And so I personally I anticipate myself as well as just a major trend with marketers paying a lot more attention to product and really trying to like spend a lot of time and invest their insights and how the amplification tools work to work with the product developers and to say, like, give me something better to sell. Give me something somebody wants to come back and buy 2 and 3 times and wants to buy for their friends. Like, you're going to make my job so much easier if you give me a fantastic product. I think we'll start to see that like line of separation break down in a really big way over the next couple of years.
I was at an event recently and Tony Yu, who owns Vessi, was on stage and somebody's like, so tell me, this is just at the end of 2024. It's like, hey, Tony, tell me, what's your marketing plan for 2025? He's like, Facebook ads?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, do you see anything beyond that? He's like, yeah, probably Facebook ads, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And that was it. Remember, they are a many 9-figure shoe company. There's something interesting though, because I have owned Vessi's. They're a wonderful product, an absolutely wonderful product. Tony has just crushed when it comes to that, especially for our area. I don't know if you've ever owned Vessi's being in Portland.
I haven't. No, I'm familiar with the brand, but I haven't had it myself.
Yeah, they're like the shoe for wet weather, right? Like me being a Vancouverite, it's just always wet here. And it's, this is just what we need, and probably very similar in Portland. Interesting thought came to mind. It's funny. I've got all these questions lined up, MacCoy. Haven't
Let's
gone
do
through
it.
a single one of them. Because I love this conversation right now. I want something just pinged in my head that I want to say and sort of talk about here. Recently, Curtis was on Operators talking. And I'm thinking about the 4 of them that are on there and the products that they have. They are all category leaders, every single one of them, and then bringing on a category leader in Portland leather goods. Think about that. Every single one of them has the best possible product that you can think of in that space. They're not trying to sell some garbage product online. Every single one has started with product of the Operators with Portland leather goods. It all comes back to that. And I feel like there's this connection that you have as a marketer and that people have as a marketer to tell product, like be like, we need something better to sell. This has to get better. Or we need to figure out a way to position this in some sort of way, or so that we don't have to discount. Where's your guys' relationship with discounting?
It's an interesting one. So like we're always trying to get people like the best possible price, right? And we're dealing with like a pretty volatile supply. Like leather is like, go eat beef, right? Like all leather is a byproduct of the beef industry. There's no cows raised and harvested for leather. So all of that leather supply comes as a byproduct of that industry.
Didn't realize that.
Really? Yeah. No, it's a very, very small fraction of what you actually get as a farmer for raising a cow. It's almost exclusively in the meat. There's almost nothing in the leather. So leather is really interesting because if you don't have a buyer lined up for that material, it is just in sheer volume of waste if you have to throw that hide away, of which there is an insane amount of beef production where there's no buyers for the hide. Even in Oregon, like our home state here, there's a lot of cattle ranchers who don't have a way to sell off those hides. And the volume of that waste is massive.
Wow.
There's a lot of research on exactly like how fast we would fill landfills if we didn't have a way to use this leather. So leather is by its nature, it's a byproduct. But that supply is not always consistent. It gets shared between all these different countries, whether it be Mexico, Brazil, China, all of these other different countries. And so the supply line's not like super consistent. So we've always had we're doing our best. That's what we really have been trying to do for the market, is to source the best leather. Again, most of that comes from the US beef industry or beef industry generally, but it's not always consistent. So we go through seasons where supply is more or less available. And so discounting kind of comes with that. But we always try to like match our price to what we can bring to the market. Like as we have extra product and supply, like we want to give that to the customers at the best possible price. And we've found that's really been a benefit to us. So we're pretty deep in that camp. We have like with most brands, we have welcome flows, we have loyalty systems. We're really big fans of loyalty systems. I know they kind of get memed and talked down on in like the D2C e-commerce world, but we have an extremely successful loyalty system. And that's the number one directive, is always give the product to them at the best possible price. Is that if you get it at a good price, like you want to share, you want to talk about that. I know I try to use this analogy, maybe it's not very well articulated, but you go to kind of a hole in the wall restaurant, you have one of the best meals of your life and it's like $15. You will never shut up about that place. You will tell all your friends, you will brag about it. You want them to come try it. Now, if you go to the fancy restaurant and it's, $100 a plate and it's kind of gobbledygook and it doesn't taste great, you will talk down on that restaurant for the rest of your life, right? And so
it's the value equation,
right? 100%.
Yes.
100%. So give them to a price that they like genuinely can't believe that they're able to like access a real leather bag in. And we see that in our referral rates. 30% of our new customers say they heard about us from a friend or family. Like 30%. I can't replace that from an ad perspective. It would be, we might be out of business if people stop talking about us to their friends. And the reason they talk is they get a good bag at an incredible price.
You and Curtis have been very active in building your personal brand this year. I would love to know the motivation behind that.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's one thing that's kind of like evolving. For me personally, I'll speak to myself. I spent years and years, again, before this, I wasn't a marketer. I'm not a professional marketer by trade until Portland Leather Goods. And all of my marketing history comes from Portland Leather Goods. And prior to that, again, I was a wedding photographer. So I spent the first few years kind of head down, just grinding, just every day, like I said, coming in and trying to make as many good decisions as possible. And it wasn't until post-COVID, and again, obviously we're very busy with COVID trying to survive. It wasn't until post-COVID, I remember we went to our first event. It sounds dumb to say in retrospect now, but I literally didn't know other marketers existed. I didn't know there was like a public forum like LinkedIn or Twitter or whoever, where people were out there talking and sharing tips. I knew agencies existed, but I didn't know there was like a community of people talking out there. And post that, like we just got really and tried to get really involved in those communities. But as of recent, this person, going out and trying to talk on Twitter and LinkedIn, one, I think it's just to help share what I still believe is there's not enough voices coming from brand operators. Agencies
Totally.
are great. We are involved with a number of agencies and they're awesome. And they tend to be much louder on social media because that's a part of their funnel is to show people how smart they are. And a lot of them are fantastic. And so that's a good thing for them. But for brands, there's not a lot of like inherent incentive in talking out loud about what you're doing. Sometimes it's advertising what you don't know, and that can be uncomfortable. So at least for me, and I know with Curtis, we're out there trying to talk. We're trying to share like the brand perspective on some of these problems. I didn't have a resource like that, so I'm trying to reach out to as many people who might be struggling with it. I personally help a lot of brands, but also one of the unintended side effects of even just my short amount of time posting and trying to put myself out there is it's really separated myself from Portland Leather Goods in the best way possible. I'm very proud of my career too. But it's really, it's created this separation where it makes it more real or permanent for me. So, that's just a note on personal branding. Like, I don't think of myself as a professional marketer. I just happen to be in the CMO seat of Portland Leather Goods and I love it. And I'm here for a long time. But that's been a very, very nice benefit, has been able to talk to more people. Some of our best ideas have come from sourcing ideas from the best people I can meet all over the community. Like various people have texted me tips and tricks that have worked great. And I've been able to help people in return. And so just passing that all on from like a karmic perspective has been really helpful. And then just posting and being out there more has accelerated that. So I don't know. I'll let you know kind of when we get to the end or if I ever feel like the end. But for now, I'm just trying to get out there and spread the voice and help as many people as I can.
It's a very interesting thing from the product perspective, right? Because I think about so many brands were built on the backs of founders being the face of them, right? And I really love the idea of in the business community doing that. Right. I think that like I'm thinking about Instagram, right? You and I both came up during this Instagram era where tons of brands, I think about our baby clothing company. My wife was the face of it for years and that really helped. Right. But we're now in this world where I don't think that B2B brands will be built without faces. I think the only possible way and the only value that companies will have beyond AI is the fact that there is a face and a human touch to them. Now you're doing this in the B2C space. And I still think that there's something interesting there. It's like funny, I see you and Curtis show up every single day in my feed. And I think to myself, I gotta buy my wife something from Portland Leather Goods. Right. And so I know that that's not, I never thought that was the intention of what you guys are doing. And yet I think that there's something there. When you think about some of the biggest brands, you think about their founders first, right? I think about like in this area, like Lululemon, like you right away think about Chip Wilson. Like it is, I think that they're kind of inextricably linked with these big brands, even Nike, right? Like what would we do without Shoe Dog, right? Like that really was just about him. And there's something that like halos onto like the human condition or the things that make us human sort of halo onto brands. I think there's something interesting there. And I don't think that was your intention, but
no, and certainly not me. Like obviously I'm not a founder of Portland Leather Goods, but just spreading that out. Like I want to hear, it's half selfishly, like I want to hear from some of the executives at these companies. Even the founders are so important and they tell an incredible story and they obviously have like the full context, from day one to wherever they're at now. But a company is big, right? An organization is a collection of people and everyone has their own lanes. And like, so for me, it's starting to get better. Like we have the operators podcast, which is really interesting. We have things like the marketing operators, which is now one layer deeper for these, the marketing professionals in these big companies. That's awesome. And I just kind of want to do more of that. I want people, for some people, their aspiration is not founder. Like they want a really great job to support their family, to, build a community, whatever that is. And so I'd love to hear from like leaders in all of these different, executive functions or all the way down, whether it be like you're an IC and you're a creator. I think that everyone has something to gain. The community has something to gain from hearing everyone's voices and, saying what worked and what didn't work. I think that that's just going to be a net positive for everyone, really. So I'm trying to do my part for that, for the marketing sense, because again, I kept my head down for years. And when I looked up, other people were there, but still kind of lost, still not really knowing which way to go. There's a lot we don't know about all of these large companies and how they're actually working and how they're thinking about certain problems. And, one of the beautiful things about the e-commerce revolution is it businesses are able to get pretty quick or big quick, but the corporate structure and the people working in them are small and familiar, right? Like e-commerce is new. It is new. It is much closer to day one than anywhere near the middle or the end of the timeline. We are fresh into this thing. And so at least my experience, when I go to hire e-commerce talent, most people have 2-3 years experience if I'm lucky. Like the average person doesn't have a decade. And that's not true in some of these other industries. Like they're much more well established. And so I just think it's like an inherently interesting period of time right now. And the more everyone like talks and shares their experience, founder, again, all the way down to the IC, like I'm here for it personally. I'd love to read more stories. So like bring it on. Everybody, please bring it on.
I completely agree. One thing I do want to point out that I think is really interesting, as I have been in this space for a long time. And obviously at Social Commerce Club, we're working with some really big brands. And this morning I was chatting, we were kind of in sort of last conversations with a $30 billion brand. Crazy, right? Absolutely crazy. Household name. Everybody knows them. And we're sort of in final talks with them. And I realize like, oh my gosh, I used to think that there was adults and there's not.
Yeah.
We're the adults. Like, oh my gosh, there's no adults in the room. I'm like, I was leading the call and there was 9 other executives on the call. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not an adult. Like you guys think I'm the one that's leading this? It's very interesting to realize as you grow up. And I think that it's more so with how much access we have now to people, and even like all of the veils have been lifted, right? It's just kind of like, oh, we're just humans. We're all just like trying to figure this thing out, no matter how big of a company it is. Everyone started out here, right? I think that's interesting. I want to know, you've been doing this for 7 years. You grew from 3.5 million to, into the 9 figures right now. That's a lot of growth. And that was, yes, product led, but mass amounts of marketing led. Where were you learning? Like, yeah, who were you learning from? I'd love to hear that.
Well, okay. So I alluded this earlier, like it really was that accelerated common sense, right? And so when I break down like skill, when I think about like how to grow better at a skill, like I have this framework. There's kind of 2 categories. There's time in and there's tricks of the trade, right? So time in is just like, if you practice drawing or if you practice your brushstrokes for 10,000 hours, you're going to get better, and pretty much linearly with that. Like it's just time in and you'll get there. And then there's tricks of the trade, which is like, if you ever worked on a job site, like a construction site, some old timer will show you some fancy way to swing a hammer or do some sort of trick that you might never learn just going through the same repetition 10,000 times in a row. And those are the tricks of the trade. Those are people who've got, some sort of like hacker figured it out. Not to use the hack word, and so it's really like a combination of both of those. Like it's creating methodologies and frameworks and like doing what works and creating consistent common sense wins, 1% every day. Everyone knows that parable, and like how much you can grow exponentially in just a year. That's my story, is really just coming in and grinding it. I talk to people in other businesses and I'm like, I'm pretty confident for most businesses that I can grow your business, but it's not because I'm going to come in and find like something you're not doing or some major unlock in your business. It's just because I'm going to come in and show you how to grind at this for years and years in a row. Mm-hmm. So like the likelihood that we're going to get better over the course of years is it's guaranteed. We're going to get this figured out. But learning, that being said, the primary advertising mechanism we're all using is like Meta. It's a giant black box. And so it's difficult. And so it's a mixture of both of those things. It's a mixture of just staying consistent with it, trying new things, looking at the data, having a really critical eye. And then also like eventually when we started networking, like we got a lot of tricks of the trade. We were able to reach out and listen to new voices and find things that worked, or reconceptualize ideas that we had for a long time that weren't true, challenge our own beliefs, and like grow from that. But again, for the long time, it was literally me in a corner, just kind of figuring it out, just kind of smacking my head against the wall the whole time. We've been very fortunate, because I say we don't have sales charts. We have production capacity charts. Like the real major problem in our business to growing and scaling was, how do we get enough product? I'm probably not as good of a marketer as some of these other people who are running, I know I'm not, as running much smaller businesses where they've had to do demand gen from day one. Like I have been in very like blessed and fortunate to focus almost exclusively on demand capture. People want our products. And so that's made things easier. I'm not ashamed to admit that. And then just keeping up with that pace and going year on year on year, trying to figure out how to keep up with that. We've had to do some demand gen, obviously, from time to time. And not every day has been, max sales velocity, obviously. But in any case, really just accelerated common sense. Don't give up every single day. Try to make some incremental improvement, no matter how small. Like I see people, this is such a problem. Like I'll talk to people and they'll say, hey, like I'll consult, like for instance, and they'll say, can you take my look at my marketing systems? And the first thing they want me to do is dig into Meta and find like something they're not doing, some like clever little thing. And I start on their website, right? Yeah. And I'm like, this button sucks. This menu sucks. And they're like, yeah. But let's not talk about that. Can you look at my Meta account? I'm like, no. Your best-selling product's out of stock. Like this link doesn't go anywhere. It's just little stuff. And oftentimes, way too often, we prefer not to focus on the small incremental thing because we're just convinced right around the corner some big hack or unlock. That's a disease. Don't do that. Win a little bit all the time. You will grow. You will get better.
I am convinced that frameworks are the hammer of like the new swinging hammer of our time, right? And so much so that recently I was thinking about this. I think it was on the weekend. And I was like, I think I'm going to write a book called Frameworks, because every time I find a new framework, I'm like, oh my gosh, this just unlocked. Like recently, one of my executives at Social Commerce Club came from Procter & Gamble, and they use this framework called the OGSM framework. And it's a 1-page objectives, goals, strategies, and measures framework that P&G would use for every single product. And then everyone working on that product would have their own OGSM that would flow into that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, I just discovered something that is like $1 billion secret. That is this most simple framework in the entire world. But if people had that, and I remember like when I learned the 7 habits of highly effective people, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is an exponential framework for how to live a good life. Like, no, when I was just down in Utah, I'm like, no wonder the Mormons are so happy, right? Like I'm pretty sure he was a Mormon, the guy who wrote 7 Habits. Like, it just makes sense. Like, it's just this disciplined framework, and these frameworks set us free, and they're all over in marketing, right? If you can find them. It's funny, when I came into, people were like, why are you guys so good at like how did you guys figure out TikTok Shop? I'm like, because it's marketing. It's not, it's just a framework. It's just a marketing framework and a new place to sell stuff. We just figured out that portion of it. I don't want to get into TikTok Shop with you. I don't think that's an
we spend $0 on TikTok, so I'm not a man after your own heart. But maybe you can convince me to the dark side one of these days.
I think that it's an interesting place where virality exists that does not exist anywhere else. That is why I think that TikTok is so interesting to me. Also, just so everyone knows, I don't go on TikTok. Just so everyone else knows. And I told the room of executives today.
It's a big confession. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I don't go on TikTok because it's crack. I will not allow my kids to go on it. But there's something very interesting about what happens on TikTok and how ideas spread really fast. And I think it's very human, the way that ideas spread. That's why it works. That's why it's so addictive. But something very interesting here is the amount of eyeballs that you were able to get at one time for a product, and the amount of incredible impressions that you're able to get. It's just like, there's nothing else like it out there.
Right.
Also, another confession, I've never actually seen in the wild TikTok Shop before because I'm Canadian and I can't actually see it.
Yeah.
So I think that those are all, it's funny, these are confessions, but this is actually, I think, why we've been able to be so successful is because seeing outside of the jar. It's very similar. I don't know if you ever hire Canadians. Canadians, I think, are probably the best marketers for Americans because we see outside of the jar. Like, I watch late night every night and I'm like, this is such a different world. America, you are so different than us. but we have this funny Canadian perspective on it. Similar to probably if you guys saw us and made fun of us. I love some of the stuff. I don't know if you've seen some of the hilarious quotes out there right now with like, hey guys, just leave us alone. Just be nice, with the tariffs.
Yeah. No, that's so funny.
And there's something there I want to get into, and we're actually almost out of time here. You got to give me just 2 more minutes of your time here.
Let's go. You're so nice. Let's do this.
Yeah. Where do you see influencers fitting into your strategy, and have you leveraged influencers in any sort of way? I want to know from this, I feel like you have this foundational grounded perspective on marketing. Yeah. Where do you see influencers and then creators separately than that? Creators being salespeople that are on TikTok Shop right now and
Got it. Got it. Okay, so the thing that I like about, I think of them in a lot of the same way that we think about referrals, right? So what's beautiful about referrals is it's the opposite of brand advertising. So what I mean by that is we're the center point of the brand. We're the brand. And when we go to advertise, you're taking the center point and you're trying to amplify outward. And referrals are the opposite. It's all of these small, constellations of brand advocacy pushing people towards the brand. And they can spread out in a way that you really can't, right? Like you just can't be in that many places at that time, all the time, talking about your products in that specific way that like a referral can. And I think of influencers much the same way. Like I'm really interested in exploring this more. We've done some affiliate and influencer programs. We have an informal, gifting program that we do with influencers, but I think about it like that is like, if you can create a constellation, like a web of people talking about your products in their own unique voice to their own unique audience, which is you talk about creative segmentation and creative iteration. That's an impossible task. Mm-hmm. Like you just can't be everything to everyone in the way that an influencer can talk to his audience in the way that they need to hear it. And then all of that pushes momentum inward towards the brand. And that has just this organic feel to it. People, they trust their friends. And so if you put a bag in their friend's hand and they genuinely love it and they can talk about it truthfully, they can move enthusiasm towards the brand. So I think about it, really simply like that, which is we have a great mix of the center point, which is us, the brand, trying to amplify outward our message, and the constellation of people pushing momentum inward. So, and how we think about those separately than creators, I don't really know, to be perfectly honest with you. Like we have UGC creators, but we were extremely late to the UGC game and we're late to TikTok. And that comes, not to double back too far, as a result of my belief on a framework, which is the more, better, new framework. Like we're on Meta, it's working. And for years, we crossed the 9-figure mark without ever running a single UGC video ad. That will blow people's minds. But we didn't
I believe you.
need it. We didn't want it. Like it was working. So we did the first step, which is more ads, just more money, more ads. Yeah. That's how we're going to go. Yeah. And then when that kind of hits diminishing returns, we made better ads. We literally would run the same ad and turn it up and up and up and up, which is more and more and more until it broke. And then we went to better. Then we tried to make a better ad that would perform at this new high scale. And very, 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 very rarely do we get to the bottom of the list, which is new, which is, okay, maybe now it's time to try UGC. Maybe now it's time to try this other advertising channel. I describe myself as channel phobic. Like I want to keep it all consolidated as much as possible, as long as it's working. If it's not working, I'm more than willing to reach out and try something new. But I mostly stick to more and better.
I think we're going to end it right there. Was very well put. MacCoy, thank you so much for coming on. If there was one thing that you could tell people that marketers in general, that they need to hear in 2025, what is it?
Okay. I work across departments. Like you are not in this, my nightmare scenario when I talk to people or if I talk to marketers and they ask for advice, my nightmare scenario is that you're in this small little room by yourself and there's a printer in the corner of the room. And every day you get this slow, like analog printout, it comes out slowly and either says you rock or you suck. And that's like my nightmare scenario because it so rarely has anything to do with just you, whether or not the business is succeeding or failing. It's all of the things combined. And so you can't conquer marketing without reaching across departments and across your entire company and finding out like what the best mix is to make the company successful. So don't be selfish. Don't try to sit in a corner and like just do your own thing. Reach out, network with your team, network with the leaders, talk to your product team if you can get a voice or you can get in that room, talk with your founders, talk with your ops team and like figure out the business. And then you'll have a much easier time amplifying that business. But you in a corner it's not a good bet. I won't put my money on you if you're just going to lock yourself in a room and focus only on your meta stats or creative iteration. Like I'm not going to bet on you. I'm going to bet on the guy who's working functionally across the entire company and is a much worse marketer because he's going to make the business better. You might only make your department better and that's not going to win.
Context is so important. Think about it like in AI right now, that's part of the principles. And this is again, why frameworks are so important is because you understand you're like, wait, that's how we work really well as humans. That's how AI works really well. I wanted to bring up just right before we go here, because I think this is an interesting point. When I was hearing you talk about influencers, I was thinking about this idea of how SEO works, right? And essentially SEO works because of really good relevant backlinks from people from sites that have domain authority, right? And so the higher domain authority sites that you get that point to your site, the more that your SEO goes up. And it's the same thing with influencers, which is why you can't just get people to post about your stuff that don't actually love your stuff, because Penguin is going to come around or whatever one of those updates is, and it's going to wipe that all out because humans can smell bullshit.
Yep.
They understand it, and they're like, you don't actually like the product. You're just saying that, right? And so be very, very careful. And it sounds like you guys have. MacCoy, such a good conversation. Thank you. We went 5 minutes over. I'm late for a call. Great to chat with you.
Thanks for having me, Jordan. It's been great.